Good, thank you. Where do I start? So, first of all, can everybody hear me at the back? So if you can't hear me, just put your hand up, because sometimes my voice just sort of drops a bit, but I'll do my best to keep the volume up. If you don't understand something I say in terms of intellectually understanding it, then and you want to ask, then just put your hand up as well. But before we do that, I was just going to pick up on something. So we'll just close our eyes for a moment. I'm going to keep my eyes open because I've got to do something. I'm not going to come out. So just close your eyes. So you can open your eyes again. So here's a question. Did anybody have to make any effort to hear the bell? So here's a second question. Was the bell just there? And it might be just taking a moment to just look at what the mind, the thinking mind, did after the sound of the bell. So just take a moment. So there might have been, I don't want to put this in, but there might have been thoughts, oh, we're starting meditation, or why has he rung the bell? So there's a whole train of thought afterwards. But initially, there was sound. So often quite quickly the thoughts come, but initially there's just the immediate experience. So we'll be sort of coming back to this as I do this talk. I'm not very used these days to giving talks. It's not like I do retreats, and on the retreats I introduce things and I lead things through, and I have a little rule that I mustn't speak for more than 25 minutes. So to be asked to speak for longer than that, I think, oh God, I have to think a load of padding to get it to last time. But there's a certain point where I get a bit sort of, with my own voice, I sort of hear it, oh, I don't want to hear any more of this. But I'll do my best to come up with work with my own resistance and keep going. So we're going to look at a bit more about this area of effort, receptivity. So in a sense, one could say that there's a natural receptivity that we have. Just then, there was the immediate knowingness of the sound of the bell. And we also have this very highly developed ability to think about things, to do all sorts of things with our mind, including making up lots of stories about the world, about the way we are, about the way that other people are, about the political situation, whatever it is. So I'm sure I mentioned the word Brexit on the last retreat I led at Vajraloka, and you could feel the room sort of ripple. So I'm sure in Turkey that there are similar words I could use would also cause certain ripples to go around the room in terms of setting all sorts of stories up and all sorts of inner tensions and feelings. So it's so we're going to be exploring a little bit about that as we go through the talk. I'm going to be looking at a particular sutta, two suttas, the Bahiya Sutta and the Salata Sutta, but mainly the Bahiya Sutta. Now a sutta, for those that don't know, suttas are like the that they can go back to the earliest teachings of the Buddha. So they're like the at the beginning, they're like the oral tradition associated with the Buddha. They weren't written down until, I don't know, 500 or 600 years after the Buddha's death that they were actually written down. And possibly in the time between them, the Buddha's time and them being written down, they might well have changed somewhat, but the pith did remain the same, generally speaking. And they're quite often little stories. They're quite often little stories. So you get quite often a sense of both the Buddha, but quite often a sense of the person who's asking the Buddha a question, or has a question, or the person wants to make a point to the Buddha. So you get an idea of both characters. And the Bahiya Sutta is named such because it's about a particular person called Bahiya. Now, the sutta itself starts by saying that Bahiya was living by the seashore, and he was living by the seashore on the western side of India. And the Buddha was living at Svarvati, which is about 1,000 kilometres away, well inland from where Bahiya was living. And Bahiya was also known as Bahiya of the bark garment. Now, to make it topical, it's suggested by the commentaries that Bahiya actually came from Turkey, from inland Turkey, and that he'd been a sailor and that he'd sort of washed up on the west coast of India. And when he got to India, he'd started practicing the spiritual life. And from the text, it's quite clear that Bahiya was respected by the local people in Suparaki, where he was living. So the text says that he was honoured and revered, and he was given food, and he was given all the necessities of the spiritual life. And Bahiya, in the sutta, he goes into seclusion. So he goes into retreat on the seashore. So he goes into reclusion, and as he's sitting in reclusion, in the sutta, a thought arose in his awareness. This thought arose in his awareness, and the thought was: had he got it right? Was he enlightened? So the thought arose in his awareness, and the next thing that happened was a devata came to him. Now, a devata is like a fairy. What would in Turkey? What would and the fairy had been a blood relation of Bahiya at one time. So they died and they got reborn more in a god realm than a human realm. So he'd gone all the way to India from Turkey, and he still couldn't get away from his family. That's my little joke for the evening. And the Devata said to him, "No, Bahiya, you aren't enlightened. You haven't got the full thing. Neither are you enlightened, nor are you even on the path to enlightenment." So actually, Bahiya, there was something about Bahiya. So he didn't react. He said, "Well, who is enlightened?" And then the Devata must have heard on the Devata grapevine about the Buddha, because she said to Bahiya, "There is someone the Buddha who lives in Savatthi. He is the one who's got the answer. And so Bahiya was so clear that he wanted to find out. He left almost immediately to go and see the Buddha. So there was something wonderful about Bahiya, was that he could hear what the Devatar had to say, and he could look at his own experience and thought, well, actually, there is doubt here. I want to find out. And he just went straight away for it. So he didn't think, oh, they must be wrong, or make up stories about it. He just went straight to where the Buddha was. We'll come on to that in a moment. And I'll have to slow down, or else I'll use up all before we got 25 minutes past. So one of the things I've been reflecting on was, where was Bahiya in terms of the spiritual life? Where was he? Where had he sort of taken rest? And why did that need to change? It was obviously he had a very pleasant life on the seashore. He positive mental states, feelings for others, but still something was missing. I thought what I'd do is I'd talk a little bit. Vajraloka mentioned that I was very interested in awareness and pure awareness, and I'm sort of also very interested in how awareness can develop, or how we can recognise more clearly what awareness is. So perhaps that's a better way of putting it. How we recognise more clearly what awareness is. So what I thought I'd do is I'll just sort of talk through the sort of stages that you can see around awareness. And it's not like these stages are necessarily linear, that you're in one state, then you go to this other state and you either stay in that state, and then you go to this other state and you stay in that state. It's more my own experience is that I can have snakes and ladders. In Turkey, the game of snakes and ladders. You can go up a ladder and you can come back down the snake. So spiritual life is quite often like that. You make some progress, climb up the ladder, and then you and likewise you're sat content and open and aware, and the next thing you're thinking about goodness knows what. So with awareness, what's it like without knowing that you're aware? What's it like? So maybe sort of, this isn't sort of a question, but sort of feel into, and quite often when we start practicing, or indeed at times when we have been practicing for a while, we can suddenly find ourselves in a story about the world, our ideas about the world. And it's almost as though these stories in our heads get projected out into the world, that the world should be a certain way. And we expect it to be that way, and we look for things that are going to show us that our story is true about the world, and we're going to ignore things that show us that our story about the world isn't quite as true as we thought it was. So there's a tension in that relationship to the world. And quite often the tension is because I'll do it graphically. We're a bit like we're up here, and the rest of it is somewhere else. I don't know if that's. I know that after the 4-hour flight yesterday, I was a bit like by the end of the flight, and the two people sitting next to me managed to down I don't know how many gin and tonics, and so by the end of the flight I was a little bit up here, a little bit unattached from the rest of my body, and so the sense of ourselves has come from up here and it's forgotten everything else that's going on. And when it gets up here, then the stories get tighter. The stories get tighter. I don't know if this makes sense. Irritability is likely to increase. Self-righteousness, attachments, sentimentality, all sorts of things are likely to increase up here. So quite often, when we start meditating or whatever it is, we realise that we're up here, and that we realise to some extent that there's a whole world going on out there that we don't actually control. That we don't, we try to, but we can't actually control it. And it is going to interfere with the stories we're telling. It's going to, our stories aren't always true, and they're going to get us into trouble. I had this horrible image when I was sat meditating. I remember, those sliding doors which have just glass and they slide. Where I worked, over a weekend they put them in, and I didn't realise that they were putting them in, and I walked straight into the next one, and that was really painful. So sometimes it's a bit like walking into something like that, those stories. Suddenly it doesn't, what we thought isn't as true as what we thought it was. Maybe it's in relationships, maybe it's in work, maybe it's in wherever it is. And that's both painful and sad, but it's also also an opportunity to reflect on how we made up that story, and are they always helpful? Are they always helpful? So it's a bit like we can move out of the story into, and this is where a practice like the metta bhavana practice can be really helpful. The metta bhavana, developing a sense of loving kindness towards oneself and towards other people. So that there's the kindness towards oneself, so when one does mess up, there's a sense of compassion and kindness for oneself. And there's a sense of kindness and compassion for others. And there's a bit of a sense from that practice to see a bit more clearly where our boundaries are, a bit more clearly where our boundaries are. That maybe our story runs out here, and then other people have a right to their story and their life beyond that boundary. So it's a really healthy place to be. Really healthy. And as when I started meditating, it was both a shock and also really interesting, just seeing how many thoughts I had. They were just there all the time. It was just like constant movement back and forward of thought. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but what I realised was that I hadn't really been at all aware of the thoughts, and aware of just how much they were informing the way I was responding to the world. So there was something, even though there was so many of them, there was something wonderful about coming into a relationship with these thoughts and the stories that I was telling. And I think that there comes a point with practice that you realise, here are all these thoughts. And meditation can really help you settle, and it can help, in a way, definitely with myself, it definitely slowed things down in relationship to the thoughts and the number of thoughts, and my body was more relaxed, and there was there had been a greater sense of ease. I was less anxious. I could still get quite anxious, but I was definitely less anxious. And I think as that happened, I think I became more aware. I became more aware. And I think slowly over time, I think I can see that there's been a movement more to identify myself as awareness than as a particular thing in awareness. So it's more, if there's anything that we are as people, as common, it's that we're all aware, we all share that. And that the more I'm in touch with that being aware in myself, the more my thoughts take their place, my stories take their place. And it's like they take their place with sounds, tastes, sensate experience, sights, smells. It's a bit like they're another arising in awareness. I don't know if that makes sense. So it's a bit like, in the tradition, sometimes it's described that a sort of a backward step can take place. So, and this is particularly associated with a practice like just sitting. So you just sit back and relax into awareness, or just sit back and relax as awareness. So you sit back and you're with the experience. It's more like you're with the experience. So you're with the experience of the sounds. You're with the experience of the thoughts coming and going. You're with the experience of the sensations in the body, and you're with the taste, whatever it is that's arising. You're just with it. It arises, there it is, and then it just falls away. And a practice like just sitting it's that point of no effort. In a sense, this is what's important, is that it might take quite a lot of effort to move towards awareness. It might take quite a lot of effort to sit. And so often, the biggest effort about meditating is actually effort involved in sitting down and meditating. So it's that point of, I'm sure that you've had that, that plan, I'm going to meditate every day, and I'm going to meditate for this long every day. And then time passes and you think, I haven't meditated for a few days, or I've meditated for a couple of weeks. So it's, the biggest effort is to get there, is to actually turn up. And to a great extent, if you turn up to meditation, potentially the rest looks after itself. Quite often that's the case. It's, if you turn up, the rest will look after itself. But even then, if the mind's very scattered, then the breath, coming back to the breath and making effort to come back to the breath, it is really important. So there's that conscious effort. And in a sense, you're engaging the conscious mind to come back. You're recognising and coming back. So, coming back, my sense of Bahiya was that he could do that. He could come back to a sense of awareness, a sense of just of stuff arising, falling away, not so caught in stories about the world and about things. And in a sense there was a lot of peace there, which is probably why he asked that question. Had he got it? That's probably why he could ask that question. It sounded like, you could ask that question. How long have I been going for writing?
25 minutes.
25 minutes. It's all going to run out of steam now. So that's where he was. And that's that's a great space to be, because he wasn't trying to protect himself particularly when a question arose. So a question arose in his awareness, had he got it. The Devata, this wonderful being, arose and told him he hadn't. He didn't react, as I said before. He just thought, well, I'll go and find out who this person, this Devata's told me. I'll just go and find out. So he travelled 1,000 kilometres to see the Buddha. 1,000 kilometres. In the sutta, it says there are two ways of translating it. It could be that it just took him one day to cover those 1,000 kilometres, which would suggest that he was even more spiritually developed, that somehow he could fly there, or maybe the Devata flew him there. But the other translation is that he was so earnest in and so applied to getting there that he wouldn't stop on the way. He'd rest at night, but he'd just keep going. He just kept going until he got there. So he got there. Goodness knows how he got there. Probably a lot by boat, by river. So that was probably the most navigable way of getting across country. So he probably went by boat, but he probably had to go through forests and jungles and all sorts of things would have happened to him. There's something in the sutta that I like around this idea of the journey. In a sense, this idea of going on a journey, a pilgrimage, to find the truth. There's something about that idea of journeying that burns up stuff. It burns up old habitual ways of being. It takes us out of our habitual ways of being and puts us in new situations. It's like coming to Istanbul from North Wales. So I'm taken out of my usual, and I'm put down to do a 50-minute to an hour tour, which takes me out of my normal condition. And so there was something about that which was really fine-tuning Bahiya's readiness. I think there was something about burning away old habits so he could fully hear what the Buddha had to say. So he got to where he was told the Buddha was. So he got there, and then the monks who were there told him that the Buddha had gone out collecting his alms, collecting his food. So he'd gone out, and but for those who don't know, within the monastic tradition, you have to have collected your food and eaten it by midday. So after that, you've got to wait till the next day. So it's not just an 8-hour or 2 in, it's after 12. So it's a very important thing so the Buddha, just like us, needs his grub. So it's very important. But Bahiya was so, he thought, I'll go and find the Buddha. So he went down to the town and looked for the Buddha, and he found the Buddha, and he said, teach me Dharma, Lord. And the Buddha said, I'm about my arms round, very important, you'll just have to wait. So Bahiya said, teach me Dharma, Lord. We don't know how long we've got to live, teach me Dharma. And the Buddha again says, well, I'm around my arms round, you'll have to wait. And Bahiya comes back again for the third time and says, teach me Dharma, O Lord. And then the Buddha, this is another little teaching, in case you've come across a Buddha, is that they'll reply if you ask them 3 times, whatever the question and whatever the situation, but you have to ask them 3 times. A bit like the 3 wishes, it sounds like, doesn't it? So you have to ask them 3 times. So the Buddha stopped and he gave Bahiya the teaching. So I shall open up. I'll just go back. A second time the Blessed One said to him, "This is not the time, Bahiya. We have entered into the town for alms." A third time Bahiya said to the Blessed One, "It is hard to know for sure what dangers there may be for the Blessed One's life, or what dangers there may be for mine." So just remember this, because we've got something coming up at the end of the sutta. What dangers there may be for mine. Teach me the Dharma, O Blessed One. Teach me the Dharma, O One well gone. That will be for my long-term welfare and bliss. Then, Bahiya, you should train yourself thus. In reference to the scene, there will be only the scene. In reference to the herd, only the herd. In reference to the sensed, only the sensed. In reference to the cognized, only the cognized. That is how you should train yourself. When for you there will be only the seen in reference to the seen, only the heard in reference to the heard, only the sensed in reference to the sensed, only the cognized in reference to the cognized, then, Bahiya, there is no you in connection with that. When there is no you in connection with that, there is no you there. When there is no you there, you are neither here nor yonder nor between the two. This, just this, is the end of stress. So, and Bahiya hears the explanation and wakes up completely to the truth of the Dharma, wakes up completely to the truth, sees it straight away. Later on, the Buddha, there's another little thing where all the monks and the nuns, they all have their special thing. They're really good at something. It might be as simple as peeling an orange, the best at peeling an orange, and in Bahiya's case, he was the quickest to get the teaching of the Buddha when he heard it for the first time. So he was the quickest, which was a good thing, as we'll find out in a moment. So what the Buddha's pointing to with this is, in the scene, just the scene, in the herd, just the herd. So in the herd, just the herd, when I rang the gong at the beginning, it was just heard. So, and then there was the immediate overlay of story. There was quite quickly a story comes in. And that's not a bad thing. It's definitely not a bad thing. And what the Buddha's pointing, if the scene is just seen and the herd is just heard, something can relax and get out of the way and potentially be left behind completely. And what that is a sense of I have to hear, I have to think, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to know this. And if that's relaxed, then there can be just this. There can be just this, in the sense of a deeper and more natural awareness, knowingness, not a sort of a